From the very beginning, a dark hole or black hole has been the core symbol of the Dark Souls series. Literally, it's smack dab in the center of the game title design. This dark hole represents humanity's dark soul. In Elden Ring, we're called tarnished. The definition of tarnish is to lose luster, which references how we have lost grace, but the word itself comes from the French terne, meaning dark or dull. Tarnished are still those with dark souls. The dark soul is something unique to humanity, and the humanity item from Dark Souls 1 says this. This black sprite is called humanity, but little is known about its true nature. If the soul is the source of all life, then what distinguishes the humanity we hold within ourselves? This single line of text is what made me obsessed with Dark Souls back when I first played it in 2013. The game is asking us, what is the nature of humanity? For as long as I can remember, I've been fascinated by human consciousness and how it works. The secret of the human heart, you could say. Then I found my favorite video game asking the same question, and I always believed that I would find my answer in these games. But I couldn't find the answer in Dark Souls all those years ago. Over the past 13 years, I've searched for that answer in neuroscience and physics and mythology and the lore of so many of humanity's greatest stories. But it wasn't until Elden Ring that everything finally came together. I've been working through the main concepts over the past 6 videos of what I've dubbed the black hole theory. A series of theories loosely connected by this symbol of a black hole with a gold ring. You see, the black hole theory is really the dark soul theory. It's a theory about you and me and the answer to the question of what distinguishes our humanity. Because the nature of the black hole, the dark soul, what it means, represents, and how it behaves, I think it gets at the heart of us, and I think it's at the heart of these games. I've been working on this theory for 13 years, and I've tried to do something really special with this video. I hope you enjoy. This is the Dark Soul Black Hole Theory of Humanity. So that everyone's on the same page, let's recap the meaning of the Dark Soul and connect it to Elden Ring. The humanity item says that the soul is the source of all life, and all beings in the game possess white souls, or in the case of the gods, gold souls. These white gold light souls are contrasted to the dark soul only possessed by humans. Though they can also use and manipulate light souls, humanity itself is defined by its darkness. Humanity is a black sprite. The age of dark is the age of man, the age when the power of the gods, the power of fire, has died out. The dark sigil is a bottomless, pitch-black hole from which the darkness of humanity seeps. In Dark Souls 1, the chosen undead is branded by the dark sign, a ring of fire encircling humanity's fragment of the dark soul. Because the gods were afraid of the dark, of the power of man, they placed a seal of fire around humanity's dark soul, containing its power. In Elden Ring, runes have replaced the soul's mechanism entirely, and the image of our soul has evolved. It's now represented by the golden rune. As I first theorized in my Tree of Memories video, the rune represents our soul, memory, consciousness, and brain, which is why it's symbolized to be in our head, not the chest like in Dark Souls, where it's symbolized the heart. At the very center of the rune is Golden Rune 1, a black hole surrounded by a ring of golden light. This looks like the dark sign, and I think this visual parallel means that this central black hole is Elden Ring's version of the dark soul. Instead of a ring of fire around the dark, we have a ring of golden light, a symbol reminiscent of the sigil of the 2 fingers, who are said to manipulate the tarnished on behalf of the gods. Another ring of light being used by the gods to contain the power of the dark. Golden runes amass around this central black hole. They're Elden Ring's version of the light souls possessed by all beings, hence why we can collect runes from all enemies we defeat. Humanity's dark soul has consistently been shown to be a black hole throughout the series. If the dark soul is unique to humanity, what does it represent? What aspect of our psyche, our consciousness? First and foremost, there's a lot of evidence that it's meant to represent our will, our willpower, our free will. The description for the Pursuer's sorcery from Dark Souls 1 says, "Sorcery of Manus, father of the abyss, grant a fleeting will to the dark of humanity and volley the result. The will feels envy or perhaps love, and despite the inevitably trite and tragic ending, the will sees no alternative and is driven madly towards its target." Pursuers is telling us that our dark soul is the vessel for the will. I can see an argument that because we must grant this will to the dark, it's not inherent to its nature, but at the very least it supports that the dark is the will. It also suggests that it's the will which feels desire in the form of love or envy, that it's the will which feels feelings. Keep that in mind for later. There's a lot of visual evidence from Elden Ring that supports that this black hole represents the will. Instead of glintstone, Wilhelm's Herodes glintstone crown has a polished circular black stone. His name is Wilhelm. The crown is a helm, aka a helmet, and this black circle represents the will, hence the name Wilhelm. Corrin wears a cartwheel around his neck, which serves as a reminder that true guidance awaits those with iron wills. The cartwheel fits our black hole gold ring pattern. Historically, this center hub is where a wrought iron axle was placed. But at the hub of Corrin's cartwheel is his iron will, his refusal to recant his prophecies. I also like the play on words of wheel and will. We can't say for certain that this was intentional given how the game text originated in Japanese, but this wordplay also pops up in Night Rain. The Witch of the Wheel gives the bone-like stone to the recluse, a stone riddled with black holes that has the power to alter fate, aka the power of free will. Finally, a lot of people agree that the runes look like eyes, which makes the central black hole the pupil. In also representing the will, you could say that our will is our vision. But my favorite piece of evidence from Elden Ring is this. Ymir's crown is a black hole with a gold ring that represents the greater will. From Ymir, we can buy the fleeting microcosm spell, a second black hole with gold ring, but one that represents the microcosm. It looks nearly identical to Golden Rune 1, the heart of our soul, because it symbolizes how we are the microcosm to the greater will's macrocosm. In our possession of our own black hole, our will, we are the lesser will to the greater will, the inner god in contrast to the outer gods. As above, so below. In Dark Souls 3, Yuria of Londor offers to draw out our true strength by unlocking the power of the Dark Sigil, this black hole that symbolizes both our dark soul and our will. Our will is what fuels us to play these difficult Souls-like games. It motivates us to push forward and overcome any obstacle until we get what we want and win. Our will is our true strength. This explains why the gods are so afraid of the dark. The nature of a god is to have control and power over reality. The power of free will is exactly what the gods fear. This is why they attempted to put a ring of fire around the dark soul, and why the dark sigil is the source of our true strength. Our willpower to learn and rise again and again to become strong enough to defeat them and become lord in place of them is indeed frightening to a god. Alright, in this next section, I want to talk about the physical attributes of the dark soul. And by physical, I mean like actual physics, mass and gravity and such. I think that the metaphysics of Elden Ring can best be explained in terms of actual physics. In the same way that George R.R. Martin takes real events and seasons them with fantasy elements to create something of his own, I have a strong suspicion that the metaphysics of this world may have been taken directly from real physics and seasoned with fantasy flavorings. To name one, the Golden Order Principia is literally a fantasy version of Isaac Newton's Principia Mathematica. Using a fantasy-flavored physics framework, not only can we explain the metaphysics of the Dark Soul, we can explain the nature of humanity. As I hope to show you, many of the metaphysical properties of the Dark Soul can be viewed as a metaphor for real psychological human experiences. But there's another level. You're made of matter, real physical stuff. You can feel the smooth surface of your phone screen. You can feel the warmth of sunlight. You can see light and make meaning from it. You can feel reality because your consciousness is part of the fabric of space-time. From this perspective, it makes a lot of sense to discuss humanity in terms of physics. In Dark Souls 1, all of the dark sorceries, aka abyss sorceries, say this. In contrast to standard soul sorceries, abyss sorcery is weighty and inflicts physical damage. Perhaps a human soul is closer to matter in its humanity. This is saying that the human soul, the dark soul, is like matter. Matter has mass, which gives it a gravitational pull and weight. Thus, we can say that the dark soul, this black hole, has the properties of mass, gravity, and weight. This is one of the major conclusions of my Runes Are Stars video. Runes are like stars because they both have mass and gravity, symbolized by a black hole. It's why the progression of the runes looks like the growth of stars, and why our head, aka our rune, is the center of the cosmos in the preceptor's big hat. In the cosmos, celestial bodies exert influence on each other with the pull of gravity. This brings us to another major conclusion of that video. The pull of gravity is the same as the pull of meaning as described by the laws of causality and regression. Not only do these laws describe all things, thus permitting us to say they apply to both stars and souls, a causality is a gold ring around a hole, visually linking all these concepts together. This is how we can equate the laws governing the outer order, the heavens and stars, to the inner order, the self and the soul. The important thing is that the dark part of our soul is capable of feeling a kind of gravitational pull from other souls and beings, as well as being capable of having its own gravitational pull. This dark part of your soul, your will, is your own personal gravitas. To have gravitas means to have an authoritative presence that inspires others to respect you and listen to you. It's a quality which helps you enact your will. Our will having gravity is a metaphor for the concepts of power and influence in the real world. In our fantasy-flavored physics framework, runes are the fantasy equivalent to stars. In the cosmos, all celestial bodies exist within the four-dimensional fabric of space-time. Likewise, there is an equivalent to the fabric of space-time in which runes, aka souls, exist in. There's a few names we could use, but I think the best name for it is the primeval current. Comet Azure represents what Azure saw when he glimpsed into the primeval current, and it's the closest we get to an actual depiction of the current itself. The sorcery fires a tremendous comet in a torrent akin to the distant starry expanse. Torrent is a synonym for current, and this current is akin or similar to the distant starry expanse, which is a pretty damn good way to describe the entirety of space-time in which all stars exist. But we should find runes, not stars, within this current, and we kind of do. The current itself looks like a blue-green Lord's Rune. We've been depicting the rune as just a static gold circle with a black hole, but really, it exists at every moment in time from our birth to our death, and flows through time. After smoothing, it looks much more like Comet Azur. In my Primeval Current is Fate video, I propose that there are many other names for the primeval current. The rune represents our memory, and we can think of this plot as the totality of our memories across our lifetime. This plot represents everything that's happened to us in our lives, our destiny, our fate. This chain of golden runes does kind of resemble the golden thread of fate from Greek mythology. You can think of everyone's lives, all threads of fate together, as weaving one large tapestry of life. This fabric of life is akin to the fabric of space-time. When you think of space-time as being the thing in which everything lives and all events happen. Against the backdrop of the night sky, the runes almost look like shooting stars, don't you think? Thinking of these runes as causalities, we get the current of causality from Berserk, the interconnected chain of all events across time. Causality is the principle of cause and effect, and by manipulating causality, you can manipulate the flow of the current. In that video, I ultimately came to the conclusion that the best umbrella term for all these concepts might just be time itself. And since space and time aren't separate, we can say that all of these concepts refer to the four-dimensional fabric of space-time. Celestial bodies like stars and black holes, with their enormous mass, warp the fabric of space-time, and this warping creates the pull of gravity. The dark part of our souls, our wills, have mass, and this mass warps the primeval current. The more mass your soul has, the greater your will, the more you warp the primeval current, which translates not only to having more gravitational pull on other souls around you, but on the primeval current itself. We use our mass to alter the ebb and flow of the current, to bend the timeline. We can say that our souls, our wills, warp causality, which is how we can manipulate the chain of cause and effect to control the outcomes of events within our own current of causality. Using the mass and gravity of our soul, we can determine our fate. Or in other words, this is how we bend fate to our will. This is how stars, aka runes, guide fate. In my third eye blindness video, I theorized that people in the lands between purposely blind themselves so that they can see with their third eye, the rune, which looks like an eye. The rune, our soul, is an eye that can see into the primeval current. Using this third eye to see, people can fight blind by moving with the flow of the primeval current, kinda like Jedi. In that video, I didn't have an explanation for exactly what and how the third eye was seeing, but I think I understand now. The pupil of this third eye is the black hole in the center of the rune, this part of the soul that has mass and gravity. That doesn't only mean its gravity pulls on other things, but it can feel gravitational pull itself. The pupil of the third eye doesn't see any kind of light. It feels the dark. Blind individuals are using their rune to feel the gravitational pull of other souls as they move through space. This makes a battle between two blind individuals less of a fight and more an elegant dance between two celestial bodies. In fact, anywhere you see the word dance in the lore, it's referring to this ability. The game goes beyond simply suggesting that we can feel the gravity of others around us in space. Many blind individuals who can see with their third eye have the ability to make prophecies about the future because they can see into the primeval current. The third eye, the black hole pupil at the center of the rune, can feel gravitational pull not only across space, but across time. This implies that a prophet doesn't so much see a future event, but feels the gravity of that event across time. They feel the pull of that event's meaning within the primeval current, and this is how they make their prophecies. If you're skeptical about this idea, don't worry. Proving this in depth is a major focus of the next video where I'll talk about how the greater will works. If that sounds interesting, subscribe so that the Primeval current knows, so that the algorithm knows you want to see my channel again. But we're left with the big question. How do we gain mass and get a more powerful soul so that we can warp the primeval current and bend fate to our will? Another finding from the Runes Are Stars video is that runes themselves have mass. Runes are our literal experience points. They're the knowledge we gain as we play the game and defeat enemies. The fusion of experience points into actual stats is what Melina calls the power to turn runes into strength, which is the game's name for the process of turning runes into mass. As we accumulate runes, the size of our rune increases, as does the mass and gravitational pull of our soul. Mass plus gravity equals weight, and great weight makes for great strength per the verdigris discus. Learning is defined as the acquisition of knowledge through experience. In essence, the rune depicts the process of learning, and learning is how we gain mass and therefore strength. The game is saying that to increase your gravitas, your pull over others, you have to go and gain experience and learn and become better. In other words, to gain mass, you have to get good. The experience we gain amasses around the will, because it's our will that fuels us to keep fighting and learning and drives us to become better. This makes every battle a battle of wills. The person who has the will to put in more time and effort to get experience will be the person who wins. Which means what determines the victor in a battle of dark souls is the person with the greater will. The entire function of our consciousness is to take stimuli from sensory inputs and process them into higher order meanings. This is learning, and it's a regressive process. As we discussed in detail in the Runes Are Stars video, we can formally illustrate how this works in the brain using a neural network diagram, which beautifully combines the symbolism of our two fundamental laws. The nodes are our neurons, aka causalities, and the connections between them look like the regression matrix associated with Radagon. This isn't a coincidence. Each layer uses the statistical method linear regression to process the inputs from the previous layer into new, higher-order meanings in the current layer. Regression assigns numbers called weights that represent the strength of the connections between the neurons, or in other words, the pull of meaning. The final element of regression, the very last node that drives learning and the creation of meaning in our mind, is none other than our will. Our will is our desire. It sets our goal, the thing we're trying to learn to do. Taking a step back, we can see the full picture. The inputs to the network on the left-hand side are sensory stimuli, our experience of the external world, the golden runes. And on the right-hand side, we have the force of regression driving the convergence of meaning, our black hole, our will. Typically, we depict neural network diagrams from left to right, but in the brain, our neurons are distributed evenly throughout our roughly spherically shaped head. So if we place our will at the center and spin our neural network diagram around, we can get something depicting the regressive process of consciousness. And if we think of these causalities as stars instead of neurons, we get something that begins to resemble the fleeting microcosm. We've just translated from the microcosm to the macrocosm. I couldn't name this theory the black hole theory and talk so much about physics without bringing up the physics of actual black holes. Beyond the event horizon, at the very heart of a black hole, is the singularity, a point of infinite density where gravity is so strong that it's ripped a hole in spacetime, and physics as we understand it ends. In some theories, this rip in spacetime creates an entirely new, separate universe within the black hole. A bubble universe. The fleeting microcosm may represent this concept of a bubble universe. It's a literal bubble spell that looks like it contains a universe within. Its visual parallel to Golden Rune 1 evokes the notion that our soul is its own universe. Which is true, isn't it? You are a universe unto yourself. A whole region of experience in spacetime that is wholly yours and no one else's exists beyond the event horizon that is your head. Runes are grace, which is called golden light, and our dropped runes are illusory sprouts of golden light. Light cannot escape from a black hole once it passes beyond the black hole's event horizon. This ring of light around the black hole in Golden Rune 1 may be representing the event horizon, where the light/runes cannot escape the black hole. Symbolically, we can think of this as information from the outside world, passing beyond the event horizon of our consciousness. Matter/information that falls into a black hole isn't lost. It's stored on the surface of the event horizon in a 2D holographic form. As a black hole accumulates information, the surface area of the event horizon increases in size, directly proportional to the mass of the black hole. Likewise, our accumulation of runes, aka information, results in a proportional increase in the mass of our soul. There may be a parallel where we can think of our consciousness or memory as the equivalent of the event horizon, in the sense that both are information storage systems. There's actually theories of consciousness out there that propose that the brain really does function like a black hole in this way. So who knows? Maybe the black hole theory is more real than we think. Collecting runes, aka experience, is how we can increase the mass and therefore gravity of our inner star, the rune. But too much mass can cause the gravitational collapse of a star. The reason why stars don't collapse under their own weight is because the fusion reactions occurring in their cores create an outward force of pressure, which counteracts the inwards pull of gravity due to their mass. Fusion and regression are both the process of making one new thing from multiple other things. Thinking of the rune as a star, I think what the game is telling us is that the regression, aka fusion, that's happening at the center of the rune creates an anti-gravitational force that keeps the rune from collapsing under the weight of the golden runes it amasses. Looking at this from a human perspective, if the golden runes are experience, this is saying that the process of learning, of fusing new memories and meanings from our experience, is the outwards force of pressure that prevents gravitational collapse in the realm of our consciousness. What the hell could that possibly mean? How could consciousness experience a gravitational collapse? Well, when a massive star runs out of fuel and gravitational collapse happens, its core implodes in on itself, typically resulting in a supernova. For some people, when they run out of willpower fueling them to learn to get good and defeat a boss, the experience of losing becomes so frustrating and overwhelming that they explode in a burst of anger. Gravitational collapse of one's consciousness could be seen as a metaphor for rage quitting. You might be thinking, there's no way the devs intended that, you're crazy. But this is just a hyper-specific example of a more general human experience. More generally, you could interpret a gravitational collapse of consciousness to be the feeling of when reality becomes so crushing you collapse under the weight of it. A feeling of depression or anger as a reaction to prolonged suffering. As we're going to discuss shortly, Suffering is associated with the formation of black holes, and it so happens that when a massive enough star goes supernova, it becomes a black hole. We have something in the game associated with intense suffering that also kinda looks like both a supernova and a black hole. The Flame of Frenzy. Midra was cursed to endure eternal torture until the suffering became too much. What we might be witnessing during his transformation into the Lord of Frenzied Flame is a gravitational collapse. A gravitational collapse of his inner star, the Rune, his consciousness, into the Frenzied Flame, triggered by his prolonged suffering. Importantly, it's not just suffering that causes his transformation. He says, "Enough. I have endured more than enough." Midra has been enduring suffering for a long time. He only becomes Lord of Frenzied Flame when he stops enduring. As crazy as it might sound, what happens to Midra and rage quitting are kinda the same thing. They're both moments when someone reaches their tolerance for suffering and goes into a frenzy. This is what gravitational collapse of consciousness means. The fusion of runes is a metaphor for creating meaning from our experiences. What prevents gravitational collapse in the face of prolonged suffering is to make meaning from that suffering. The force of regression that fuels that fusion is the will, and the will feels envy or perhaps love. It was Midra's love for Nanaya that gave him the will to endure his suffering and make meaning from it for as long as he did. Melina tells us that she'll play the role of our maiden, turning our runes into strength. Maybe this isn't just referring to some magical fusion process, but to the very human idea that love for another fuels our will to endure and become strong in the face of suffering. And maybe this is why those who lose their maidens, like Vike and Shabriri, decide to embrace the frenzied flame and let chaos, complete and utter meaninglessness, take the world. The creation of the Flame of Frenzy seems to be one extreme case of a more general pattern relating suffering and black holes. My theory from the Night in Pain video is that suffering and loss causes the formation of a twisting black hole, best seen in the sorcery Eternal Darkness, the Nox's despair manifested. This black hole can manifest on a macro level, where mass sacrifice events cause the formations of storms. But on a micro level, loss and suffering create a hole in one's soul. In most instances, this hole is formed due to the loss of a maiden. And this is ultimately why we are told that the sacrifice of our maiden is required to become a lord or knight of blood. This brings us to another major conclusion of the Night in Pain video. In order to become a lord, we need to form a black hole in our soul, the rune, to create a lord's rune. And this is triggered by the sacrifice of our maiden. The pain from the loss of our maiden was so great, it ripped a literal hole in the space-time fabric of our soul. For anyone who's gone through a serious breakup or lost a loved one, I don't need to tell you that that is exactly what it feels like. It might be that earlier versions of the rune are just stars, and only in Heroes Rune 4 does our soul become a true black hole. It even kinda looks like that famous first image of a black hole, although it most closely resembles a quasi-star, a hypothesized massive star with a black hole at its core. I like this quasi-star interpretation better because while its core collapses into a black hole, it doesn't go supernova like we see with the frenzied flame. Unlike with the frenzied flame, our consciousness doesn't collapse. It remains intact and even powered by its black hole core. But why would this need to happen to become a lord? Well, this black hole is much larger than the one seen in Golden Rune 1, which represents a significant increase in the size, mass, weight, and gravity of our dark soul. As suggested by the verdigris discus, great weight makes for great strength, and we need strength befitting a lord. And I find it supremely intriguing that in this evolved version of the rune, the central black hole is no longer obscured by small wisps of golden grace, and the ring of golden light encircling the hole has been broken. Grace is meant to guide the tarnished, and the ring of light represents the seal of the gods meant to control the power of the dark soul. I mentioned earlier in the video that another name for our will is our vision, hence why the rune looks like an eye. And this eye is no longer obscured by grace, by the influence of the gods who came before. I think what this change in our soul represents is that we now have the gravity, the strength, to become Lord and impress our own vision, our own will, upon the world. And perhaps that's the point. We need to have a will strong enough to challenge the greater will itself. The dark soul is the vessel for the will, and the vessel for its suffering. Suffering and loss go hand in hand with will and desire, because we only desire what we do not have or what we have lost. In a way, they define each other. In Dark Souls and Elden Ring, what it takes to win the game is the will to beat the bosses, constant suffering from dying, and learning how not to die. The effect of suffering, the increase in willpower, and the accumulation of runes are all ultimately the same thing, do you see? I think this is why the Mother of Truth desires a wound, because pain drives us to learn. Pain grows the size of the dark soul, the will. It increases its gravity, its power of regression, and its ability to learn by amassing more runes, more knowledge and experience. This is how suffering and loss can serve as the fuel for greatness, and this truth is at the very heart of these games. Prepare to die. Prepare to suffer, prepare to lose, prepare to fight these bosses over and over again until you win. You only win because you've lost. That is what is required to become Elden Lord, both in the game and in reality. In this final section, I want to bridge the gap between the theory of humanity we've mined from the lore of this game to a real-life theory of humanity. For this, I want to return to neural networks. Just like we use the fantasy-flavored physics framework to find lore analogs to physics concepts, we can do the same with concepts from neural network theory. Like I said, the left-hand side represents the external world, the sensory stimuli that act as inputs to our brain. And on the right-hand side, the final element representing the force of regression that drives learning is our will. In the official language of neural network mathematics, this element often goes by a particular name, the loss function. For neural networks, the very, very last layer consists of just this one function, and it's this function which guides the whole learning process. Statistically speaking, the loss function measures the difference, or loss, between the network's output, its predicted value, and the actual truth it's trying to learn. The loss function is a measure of how far the network is from its target goal, and minimizing loss is what drives the network to learn. Another function, the objective function, defines the overarching goal that the network is optimizing for. It basically sets the will of the network. The loss function guides learning in pursuit of the will of the objective function. Do you remember what the sorcery pursuer said? The will feels envy, or perhaps love, and despite the inevitably trite and tragic ending, the will sees no alternative and is driven madly towards its target. Our will is the part of us that feels feelings, and these feelings drive the will to pursue its goal. There's a simple equation that I believe determines happiness, and inversely, sadness. Reality minus expectations equals happiness. If your expectations exceed reality, you'll be disappointed. And if reality exceeds your expectations, you'll be happily surprised. This equation is a loss function. Your expectations are the predicted value, and reality is the actual truth, and the difference between them is the loss. A positive value here is a positive feeling, aka happiness. A negative value is sadness, pain, suffering. This side of the equation is the conscious experience of our feelings. Our feelings act as the loss function for our consciousness. Our will feels the feelings that drive us to learn to become better in pursuit of our desires. The dark soul is the vessel for our will, and it's depicted as being in the center of our chest because it represents our heart. In Elden Ring, it's evolved to represent our brain because that's where our feelings truly live. When Yuria of Londor teased out our true strength, she did so by unlocking the power of the dark sigil, our will, the vessel for our feelings, because our feelings are our true strength. This all really boils down to one of the most ancient and true of human cliches. Follow your heart. The rune and its lore and what it means truly does represent a model of consciousness. This is you in the lore of the game, and this is you in the language of math. They're depicting the same thing. It was important to me to try and formalize these ideas with a real-world, hard scientific concept like neural network theory. I want to show you that the will and consciousness and feelings aren't just psychological concepts that kinda tie together in an abstract philosophical way. They have real neuroscientific and mathematical identities that are the real fundamental foundations for how you work. And if you understand how you work, then you can use that as a tool to make yourself better and get what you want. I've always felt that the Dark Souls games felt like the real world. Because the real world is hard. There's no walkthrough and the lore is hidden. And the person you could end up marrying is locked away in some tower. And you might just miss her unless you explore the world and talk to people who help you meet her. Or go on some app to find her. And sometimes you'll lose her, and you'll start searching for meaning in a story filled with so much truth about humanity that it must contain the answer to what to do with a broken heart too, right? The answer, according to the Dark Soul theory, this theory of humanity, is that our pain and suffering are the very things that make it possible for us to learn and what drives us to achieve great things. And as humans, we want to do great things because we're driven by the power of the dark soul, by our will to learn and expand ourselves and our gravity and become great so that we can challenge the gravity and wills of others around us in this primeval current we call reality. This truth is baked into the lore of the game and into the very design of the game itself. It's called Dark Souls because the entire game is a manifestation of the Dark Soul. I love this game and its world and what it means. I love this theory, and I think about it nearly every day. When bad things happen and I suffer, amidst the pain, I find myself almost wanting to smile. Because I know that I can use that pain as fuel to change myself and become great. I know I can rely on the power of the dark soul, and so can you. This is the dark soul black hole theory. It's a theory about you and me and the nature of our humanity. And isn't it just so goddamn beautiful?